I stopped pulling people off coffee routinely because they all hated me.
It's cruel and unusual punishment.
It is cruel and unusual.
Okay, so today, Dr. Tracy Cook and I are going to talk about stress and anxiety.
Yes.
How many of your patients, percentage-wise, do you think are dealing with the effects of stress upon their physical and mental health, or anxiety in some form?
I wouldn't say 100%, but pretty close.
Yeah.
Pretty
Definitely
close.
somewhere between 65 and 85%. Like most
Somewhere
of
in
us.
there. Most people are having stress-related exacerbation of their health.
Right.
Problems.
Whether it's, anxiety that's preventing them from sleeping properly, whether they're having memory issues, they can't remember where they put their phone, whether it's affecting their mood, so getting irritable or sad, or just feeling really anxious, very keyed up all the time.
And overwhelmed.
Overwhelmed is a big one.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And yes, because I find some people will say, I feel stressed. Mm-hmm. Other people don't have that feeling.
Right. It's like they feel like they can meet the demands of their day, deal with the stressors, but they're still experiencing the physiological stress, which is a different thing. We do need to differentiate between the two.
Yeah, the stress can go to the body and it can go to the mind. Or it can go to both.
Both. Most commonly we see
Most
both.
commonly both, yeah. But it is possible to think that you are not experiencing any stress and have some consequences to the body.
Definitely. I have a lot of patients who are very successful career people, can be very type A, and they're like, yeah, I'm doing it. And, I enjoy my job and yet they're having heart palpitations or they're having trouble sleeping, but they're still handling everything. But they're living so much of their life in fight or flight.
Yes.
So when the adrenal glands are pumping out adrenaline and you're just go, go, go. So dealing with a stressor will cause you to go into fight or flight. So we also call it sympathetic overdrive because it's the sympathetic nervous system that's online at that point. But also a cup of coffee will do that, right? Yeah. And kick you right into fight or flight.
Yeah, and if we just really quickly review the autonomic nervous system. So we have our central nervous system and we have our voluntary nervous system, which regulates things like, okay, I'm going to touch my nose. Okay, that was voluntary. I thought about doing it and I did it. The involuntary nervous system, how fast is my heart going? Am I digesting my lunch? I'm not consciously controlling that. If my brain is not involved, it's still happening. And that's the autonomic nervous system. And that falls into sympathetic and parasympathetic. It's either or. It's either in a sympathetic state or the parasympathetic state. Sympathetic
both can't be online at the same time.
No, it's either or.
Yeah.
And it goes back and forth throughout the day, normally. But sometimes it doesn't. And then we run into trouble.
Yeah. So we do see a lot of people with digestive issues too. And sometimes, there's a million reasons why someone might have digestive issues. And that's a talk for another day. But if you are stressed out all the time and you're in fight or flight, sympathetic overdrive, how are you supposed to get into parasympathetic, which is rest and digest? So your food's just sitting there.
Yeah. And that's going to look different for every person.
Yeah.
So that's where the discussion needs to start. There are always supplements that can help, but lifestyle is the critical component here. And so what we need to ask our patients.
Yeah.
We say, well, how do you relax? Do you meditate? Do you exercise? Do you get enough sleep? And they're like, I can't sleep. And you're like, okay, let's start with that.
Yeah, we need to deal with that.
And, what's on your mental load? This is a common concept that we talk about is the mental load. It's not, the things that we need to do in a day may not be difficult.
Yeah.
But there just might be too many of them.
Right. So you might be holding down a full-time job and maybe you have good boundaries with your work and you're only working 35 to 40 hours a week. However,
Maybe.
Do you also have kids? Are you managing their school schedules, their sports schedules? Are you also taking calls from elderly parents or a sick relative? Are you also volunteering in the community? That's a lot of stuff going on. And it all adds up. And we all have an individual level of resilience, right?
Yeah, and different people have different capacities. And different people have different responses to the same situation.
Yeah.
What might make one person invigorated might make another person exhausted.
True.
And you have to respect that. You can't say, well, so-and-so can do that, so I can too.
Right.
Like, well, maybe that's their thing.
Yeah, we really do have to stop the comparison.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah,
saying,
we're all different.
Yeah, like I need to be doing what she's doing, and social media is so bad for this. So I sometimes prescribe a social media detox, and I tell people, and I didn't make this up, I read it somewhere, but don't compare your friends' highlight reels to your behind the scenes.
Yes.
Because you're living your life, you know you're behind the scenes and you know what it takes to make your life happen. But you don't put all of that on social media.
No.
So we got to stop the comparisons and we have to just look at our own lives and figure out how to make them balanced and how to make them work.
Yeah.
So beyond all the lifestyle adjustments that we might have a heart-to-heart with our patients about, what about herbal adaptogens? I mean, most people don't know that this class of herbal medicines even exists.
No, I love adaptogens. They are one of the most brilliant things that has ever existed. So adaptogens help the body adapt to life, makes us more resilient, or as I like to say, better, faster, and stronger. Not to get all competitive about it, but it makes, or the things that bother you stop bothering you when you get the right adaptogen. There's a number of adaptogens. Every single herbal tradition on the planet has adaptogens that they use.
Yeah.
And we're fortunate enough to live in a time where there's global access to different materials and there's global access to information. So we're actually able to use herbs from a lot of different herbal traditions.
And that's how we're trained as naturopathic doctors too.
Yes.
We're trained in the use of herbs that are, some of them we can go out to the woods here in Northwestern Ontario and harvest, but we're trained in herbs from around the world.
Yes. And so adaptogens, now if you're just, sometimes you pick a formula that has a number of different adaptogens in it. Adaptogens all have, I like to think of it as a different personality.
Yeah.
Right? And, so you think of, so adaptogens that you've probably heard of include ginseng. Ginseng's the most famous one.
And yet there's all these different types of ginseng.
There's different types of ginseng, right? You look at red Korean ginseng, which is by nature hot and aggressive. So if you are already hot and you take red Korean ginseng, and I've seen this in practice where people are like, I've got these terrible hot flashes and I'm exhausted, and they're on Korean ginseng, and I'm like, so let's not do that.
Yeah. Whereas Siberian ginseng or Eleutherococcus is more cooling, right?
Eleutherococcus is neutral to cooling.
Neutral, yeah.
And has the nature of, it's good for the concept of dampness in Chinese medicine, right? People who feel worse in a damp environment or who tend to experience swelling or water retention or bloating, often Siberian ginseng, Eleutherococcus, will do really well with them. And then you think about an actively cooling adaptogen like Schizandra.
Yes.
Right? And the picture of Schizandra is you can use it for lungs as well.
It's the 5 flavored berry. So I remember tasting it when I was a naturopathic student. And it's neat because it helps it from a traditional Chinese medicine perspective. It gets into more of the meridians because it's got these 5 flavors. And in terms of the personality of Schizandra, it also really helps with low libido, in addition to helping with energy level and stress resistance. Yeah,
so an adaptogen will normally make you more resilient to stress and more energized but relaxed.
Yeah, it's an interesting thing. It's not like coffee.
No.
I mean, that said, some ginsengs, like Panax ginseng, is fairly stimulating. Like, I don't generally recommend it long term. Like, I might, if someone basically needs like a rescue mission, like they have to get through the exam period or the wedding or whatever, I'm like, okay, take our 3 ginsengs tonic, take that for the next few weeks, then we'll reassess after the big event.
Yeah.
But you don't want to be on those stimulating ginsengs for too long.
Not for too long, no. And so the ginsengs are, so some are more appropriate for long-term use.
Yeah.
And some are really not.
And they're all their own individual personalities. Another important adaptogen that I love to prescribe it to others, and I often take it myself, is licorice root. And that one of the most important features of it is that it can gently support and elevate blood pressure. Yes. So it's a real no-no for anyone with hypertension or high blood pressure.
Yes, absolutely can't use it.
But if you're the kind of person who, you get a head rush when you stand up or sit up, and maybe you faint sometimes, or, you have that low blood pressure picture, then it can be really beneficial.
Yeah, and very energizing fairly quickly.
Yeah.
It's a good one for that, absolutely.
And doesn't it help with cortisol levels too?
It slows down the breakdown of cortisol.
Yeah.
Right. So if we're in that cortisol dysregulation, sometimes we want to have actually want to test and see what cortisol is doing. Sometimes cortisol production is low, but the body doesn't break it down. And so cortisol levels seem okay.
Right.
But sometimes you're making a lot of cortisol, but breaking it down at breakneck speed. And in that case, the licorice is going to be really useful for you.
Right. It'll help you maintain your cortisol levels, because cortisol is that hormone that helps you meet all the stressors, meet the demands of the day. So if your body's breaking down cortisol too fast, you're like crashing at 2 p.m. and, reaching for coffee because it's all you can think of to get through the rest of your day.
Yes, exactly. And then, yes, the coffee is kicking the cortisol levels back up, but to the detriment of your system as a whole.
Absolutely.
If you find you're dependent on coffee, we have a problem.
Yeah, we have a discussion.
To have,
and we're not going to take you off of coffee cold turkey. We're not that mean.
I stopped pulling people off coffee routinely because they all hated me.
It's cruel and unusual punishment.
It is cruel and unusual
punishment. I do drink coffee in the morning, so, but I did have to scale back because of my cortisol levels. I had to take care of them, right?
Moderation in all things. And some people can't do any coffee. Particularly our very anxious people. And that's one of the first things when somebody has anxiety. And I am always forgetting this. Dr. Carfagnini is excellent at remembering when you have somebody who's like jittery and super anxious, the first question needs to be, what's your caffeine intake?
Yeah.
Because often that's part of the problem. But so people can have a lot of stress and not be anxious, and people can have anxiety without stress. Let's just talk about anxiety on its own.
Right. I mean, most of us know what anxiety is, right? And it can present in so many different ways. But when we look to herbal medicine for anxiety, we need to talk about the nervines, right?
Yes. There's actually a category of herbs. I love the word anxiolytic, anxiety breaker. And we in 2020 and 2021, we have sold a lot of those herbs.
Yeah, people have been stressed out.
A little stressed, yeah.
Yeah.
Just a smidge.
And some of those herbs are widely available. So you can go into your grocery store, and if you buy a sleepy time tea or a bedtime tea,
often they'll have some of those herbs.
So chamomile, lemon balm, skullcap, passion flower. And again, they all have their own personalities, right? Some of them are more sedative, like passion flower. I'm not going to prescribe you passion flower and tell you to get in your car and drive.
No.
Right?
Bad plan.
But
don't do that.
Lemon balm, you can usually do that.
Yes, you usually can. You usually can. So
when we say usually, because every once in a while we have a very highly anxious person that as soon as you just give them some calming herbs that don't have sedative qualities, they're just calming, all of a sudden they crash because they've been running on anxiety for so long. Yes,
so they don't actually have energy. They're actually exhausted and they're running on their anxiety. And you take the anxiety level down and they feel the fatigue for the first time. Yeah. And I've had a number of people say, this herb is making me tired. And I'm like, no, you're tired. the herb is making you aware that you're tired.
Yeah, and now we need to get you to bed earlier, and now we need to, maybe give you other adaptogens or tonics that build you up.
Build your real energy back up.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And what about vitamin and mineral deficiencies? Those are super common. I can't even tell you how much vitamin D deficiency, B12 deficiency, and iron deficiency I've been seeing lately.
Well, it was really interesting. A couple of years ago, I attended a webinar on treatment. It was on treatment of dementia in the elderly, and it was a course, and it was run by the head of the nutrition department at the Naturopathic College in Toronto. And his view was that anyone over the age of 70 assume they're malnourished.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, that's quite the statement.
Absolutely.
And I don't think he's wrong. I mean, not everybody I have, but
if you have to be actively working on it. You have to be working on having a nutrient-dense diet.
Yes.
You have to make sure that your digestive system is working properly, and you have to make sure you're on the right supplements. Because if you're over 70 and you're not on key supplements such as B12 and vitamin D, you're probably low in them.
You're probably low.
If you live in Ontario.
Yes.
Yeah.
If you live near the equator.
If you live near the equator, you might be okay for your vitamin D.
Yes. Sunshine vitamin.
Yeah.
So.
But vitamin D deficiency, I just want to focus on that for a second. What happens when you're really vitamin D deficient for years? You get depressed. You get tired. Your immune system stops functioning properly. You're more at risk for cancer, MS. I mean, this goes on.
It's very subtle, though. It's not like you can say, here's a list of symptoms of vitamin D deficiency.
Yeah.
Interestingly enough, the Canadian government put out a position paper years ago saying, if you are Canadian, assume you are deficient and supplement.
Yeah.
So the position of the federal government of Canada is that every single Canadian needs to be on a vitamin D supplement.
Absolutely. But what about dosage?
That's where it gets tricky. And it is, in the past, I would just give a standardized dose to everyone. But then as we were using vitamin D testing more commonly, I've now turned my opinion around with more information and said, okay, dosing is really incredibly variable.
Yeah.
We always test, and this is the big mistake that I see made by other practitioners, not us, of course, is to test vitamin D at random times of the year. And vitamin D needs to be tested midwinter. If we are evaluating vitamin D supplementation levels, you need to take out of equation your sun exposure.
Yeah.
So vitamin D levels in the average Canadian is going to be lowest in February or March. So that's when we test. That's where we're going to see, the amount that you're supplementing, is it adequate to get you through that midwinter dip?
Right. But that's when we test if we're trying to see if the vitamin D supplement's working. If I get a new patient in the summertime and they've never taken a vitamin D supplement and they're complaining of fatigue and sadness, and I'm going to test you now because I got to figure out what your baseline level is and then figure out what dose you need every day to get you up to about 120 nanomoles per liter.
Yes.
Now, 75 is considered sufficiency, but you're still not going to be at your best at 75. So
125 is optimal.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I always say 120, you say 125. I think maybe we attended the same webinar. I don't know. But we really want to get up in that range because if you're at 80 and you're told, oh, that's fine, it's probably not.
It's probably not, especially if it's in September.
Yes, exactly. Yes. So
definitely not fine.
Really, when you come see a naturopathic doctor, it's all about not only dealing with the symptoms that you have now, but optimizing your health so that you can have the energy and the vitality to do the things you want to do, enjoy your life, spend time with loved ones. Whatever you want to be doing, you should be able to do it. We're not okay with the idea that you're just tired because you're whatever age, or you're tired because your job is demanding.
Yes.
We think you should be able to enjoy your life. So we're here to help you do that.